Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Moyer, author of Win Again, speaker, career coach, and business advisor. And I help athletes, executives, and entrepreneurs reach their fullest potential. What you're going to be hearing in every single episode are conversations with athletes and other sports-related influencers. And we'll be offering you the insight that you need to succeed in life, including advice that will let you jump past your competition, whether it be for a great new job or taking your business to a much, much higher level. Make sure to connect with me on social media at Mark Moyer Coach and go to my website, markmoyer.com, to get access to the tips and strategies that my coaching clients get directly. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email to mark@markmoyer.com and I'll get you going right away. Thanks for joining me today. It's going to be an awesome episode. Now, are you ready to make your mark? Let's do this. Hey everybody, welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer and I'm broadcasting to you live from New York City. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have you listening wherever you are. If it's here in New York, super. Or anywhere else in the country or on the planet, thanks for being here. And I'm really excited because I just had an amazing conversation with Eric Kussin. And Eric he's had such an incredible life already. And he's a young guy, but he spent several years in the sports industry, but then went through a really dramatic downturn, a mental health, really a breakdown. And nobody really knows how it happened or why it happened, but he's emerged from it not only a better man, but he's really taken to a cause. Like he's launched something, a movement that's really going to take everybody by storm. And it's really amazing what he's doing. But before we jump into that, make sure you go on to iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you're listening to this, leave a review, send me an email if you'd like directly to mark@markmoyer.com. I'd love to hear from you. And go onto my website when you have a chance. Access to all the previous episodes, all kinds of great content on there. There's articles, there's videos, there's really great information about how to take your career and your business to a great new level. And there'll be webinars, all kinds of stuff. But enough of all that. I'd love to have you listen to Eric Kussin. He's a great guest. This was a great episode. Happy listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Make Your Mark podcast. My name is Mark Moyer, and I'm thrilled to have Eric Kussin on board today. Eric's done an incredible job over the last couple of years to really put into the forefront and into the limelight and spotlight an issue that really needs to be addressed. And I'm just excited to have Eric. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, man. Funny enough, I wish it was a couple of years because it's only been like a little over a year now. And the reason I say that is because it hasn't been that long since I went through what I went through. So, but I appreciate that it's felt
like
that long.
A couple years, right?
Yeah, it does.
Well, it's interesting because you and I met about a year or so ago. You had your the kickoff event for We're All a Little Crazy and Same Here movement back in, I think it was November 14th. The reason I remember that is it's my wife's birthday. So it was a little bit of a conflict as to whether I should show up at your event or hang out with my wife on her birthday. But it was an awesome event, and it really, you did a great job with presenting what had to be presented, and you had some great athletes there. It was a great event, but that's skipping way ahead. I'd like to take several steps back and really get a better feel for myself and our audience. What is it that sort of turned into what you're doing now? Because, we all know that life throws us a bunch of random curveballs and knuckleballs and fastballs and everything. And we often don't know what's about to get to us and hit us. And obviously that did happen to you. But taking a giant leap backward or a small leap backward, I make fun of you a little bit because I went to a rival, but you attended Cornell University, one of the inferior colleges in America, I believe. As a Colgate graduate, that's what we used to think. I did plenty of road tripping down to Cornell. Beautiful campus, beautiful school. But tell me a little bit about your experience while you're at Cornell and what, I know you did some internships, but what got you started on this pathway where you said, you know what, sports is going to be my direction, my life?
I think the interesting thing about what got me into being interested in the business side of sports is ultimately when we get to the end of the story, what might have taken me down when you talk about how life gets in the way. So typical story like anyone else, growing up, I was the middle of three boys, and sports, in terms of playing sports, was my whole life. Right. So, football, baseball, soccer, basketball, hockey in the streets, hockey and ice hockey, and, winning Scholar Athletes Awards and playing on multiple teams in different seasons. And I don't say that as a way to say, pat myself on the back. It's more to say I had this myopic focus on sports as my world, right? And that's where I felt my happiest. And that's what I went towards. And so that propelled me then when I went to college. I actually, interestingly enough, had started doing internships in the business side of sports, even senior year of high school.
Oh,
so I worked for USBL, a team that was called the Long Island Surf. That was a league that Anthony Mason, God rest his soul, back in the day, had played in. And so going through college, I just did a number of internships with the Jets International Management Group, a British basketball team, when I studied abroad in London. And so it was very much, I knew that sports was my focus when I was playing.
Right.
I walked on to the football team, but this is the cliche story. You're not going to go on to play professionally. So where do you take it from there? The next focus became, okay, how do I start to grow my career in the business side of this industry?
And so when you started doing some of these internships, what really, I mean, you're 18, 19, 20, 21. I mean, you're still a young guy, but you're involved with some of that. You start seeing the different angles of different businesses. What really compelled you to say, wow, this is all really cool, and I can see myself having a career in this area? Was there a specific internship that really stood out?
There wasn't. And that's the interesting thing about internships is, at IMG was working in the marketing partnerships, sponsorship group. Uh-huh. When I was with USBL, it was more on the basketball side of things. So, you think about business side versus basketball side. When I was with the London Towers, more grassroots community relations type of work where you're teaching the sport to a new generation, because for them, basketball was a third rate or a fourth rate sport. So right. It was, I knew there was a passion for the sport itself. I didn't know where I'd find my passion within which business unit it would be. Okay. And ultimately, even as we get past Cornell and onto my first job in the NBA, I'll tell you, I started the marketing partnerships group at the NBA. I didn't even know necessarily what my day-to-day was going to be like. I just knew that marketing was behind the title, and ultimately ended up changing over to the team marketing and business operations group because that's where I found my passion on the team business side.
Well, right. And so, the interesting thing is with the NBA, I mean, there's got to be, I don't even know how many employees are there, but obviously people dream of working at the NBA, right? They say, geez, it'd be so cool to work there. It's funny. It reminds me of obviously Seinfeld with George Costanza and how he's like so amped up to work for the Yankees, right? But he ends up being the assistant to the traveling secretary or whatever the hell it was. So you're in this job and then you start out. So you're right out of school and you're sort of the rookie, the newbie, the whatever it is. And, did they give you some substantial stuff to start with, or was it sort of like go fetch the coffee kind of thing?
Sure. No. So we started in this program that was called the Associates Program. Okay. And Mark Tatum, who's now the deputy commissioner, was the one who ultimately ended up hiring me after 8 phone interviews over an 8-month span.
Oh my God. Wow.
I was fortunate to work for a man who was an incredible people person and manager. Mm-hmm. So he taught me the ropes. And one of the things that even I would say I learned just by watching him, not necessarily by what he told me, was it doesn't matter what my responsibility is. Do it at the best of my ability, because let's use an example as perverse as being the person who everyone goes to for photocopies. If you photocopy something better than anyone else, people are going to then trust you to then come to you for the next thing that they have when their plate is full. So I kind of took that from him. And I knew that funny enough, the associate program was considered a level below the assistant level when you think of the hierarchy on the business side. Associate, assistant, and manager. And so there were 16 of us that started from all over the country in all different departments. And mine was marketing partnerships, working for Mark. And I didn't love the day-to-day. I mean, my day-to-day was working with Nestle to incorporate them into rhythm and rims, a traveling, music and basketball vehicle. That doesn't feel like it's connected to the sport itself. But in being in that role, I learned about management, right? I learned about organization. I learned about motivation. And so was able to take that then when other opportunities we'll talk about opened up. But I would say it was very much learning by watching other people who are successful and say, if I can make myself available to be a top performer when they need me, I'll be available for them. And that's when folks started to come to me.
Well, that's great. I mean, look, one of my feelings on doing something like that, and I fully agree with you, is that if you're establishing yourself as the guy with a tremendous work ethic, and yeah, you're making copies, but you're making better copies than everybody else. I guess the only thing to worry about is if you do them so well, maybe they say, you know what, he's really good at making copies. Let's keep him there. but doing it just well enough that it gets recognized, I think it's fabulous. So you spent 5 years with the NBA, and you moved on to, you then shifted from being at a league to starting to work for a few different teams and so forth. And what was, we don't need to go through each one, but give me an idea of what it was like to work for specific teams and your role within those teams.
Sure. And again, I switched to team marketing and business operations because they wanted someone to be in a role to work with the players on understanding the business side of basketball, right? So I would travel around market to market talking to the players, the coaches, the general managers about the importance of interacting with season ticket holders and corporate partners. I give you that background to say that helped me learn the team business, even though I was working at the league side, because I had to know what was happening in the local market and then be able to go into those local markets and say, here is how your organization generates revenue. Here's how you're a partner tied to that. To answer your question in terms of what it was like working for the teams, I was basically told, go out to Chicago in no uncertain terms and help start up a WNBA team with the Chicago Sky.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And I went there. Yeah, I went there as even though I was a league employee, I was a glorified ticket seller on the phone selling women's basketball in Chicago. But what I learned there is back against the wall, it can't be done, figure out a way to make it happen. And that's where this whole concept of selling, I ended up loving sales after thinking of sales as, oh, that's what used car salespeople do. That's what sleazy people do.
Right.
I realized that's really about connecting what the need of the individual is with the product you have and fulfilling that need. And again, I know that's cliche, but when you're thinking about basketball, it's breaking it down into different categories: family time, date night, interaction with your employees, interaction with your clients. And so if you can give people an understanding of what this ticket does for you beyond just entry into a basketball game, that was exciting to me. And ultimately, I know we won't go through the rest of the stops along the way, but they offered me the opportunity to come from the league office at 25 to be their director of sales and service there. And they gave me 2 days to decide. And so I see that as a joke to say, if they had given me more time, I don't know that I would have taken it, because I was a New York guy, grew up there, went to school up at Cornell, and then was in New York at the league office. To move my life to Chicago and work for a WNBA team, and we're talking about something related to stigma. Let's be honest, back then, as a guy, when you're working in professional sports on the male side of things,
right,
to then go take. But I loved it. I respect the female sport so much. And then from there, Phoenix Suns, which had the Mercury with it. And so regardless of where I went with my career on the men's side of things, I'm a fan of women's sports completely.
Oh, that's great. Now, so you end up, you're with these different teams. So then walk me through what happened. You're cranking right along. You're with these, you're with the Devils, the Panthers, and so forth. And then give me the timing of when things started to not feel so right. When did that start happening for you?
So in terms of serious symptoms, the beginning of 2015. So I was 6 months into my role, chief revenue officer with the Panthers. New ownership group comes in, purchases the team, and hires basically two of us to run the business operations side of the franchise. And so we're spending all this time building a culture, hiring employees, interviewing. And I started to notice my interest for things outside of work started to wane. So wasn't interested in going to the gym, wasn't interested in buying clothes that look good for work, wasn't interested in going on dates, wasn't interested in watching games. And I justified that. Remember, I said it was going to come full circle, so this is that part of it. I justified that in my mind, saying, just like I had sports that I played when I was younger and everything else wasn't as important, well, now I've got this position as chief revenue officer. It's one step away from this goal that I have of being a team president. My myopic focus now needs to be on the business side, and this is the world's way of telling me these things don't matter. That was an unhealthy way of thinking, but that's the way that I justified it. And that justification lasted for 2 weeks, because after 2 weeks of thinking that way, I woke up and found it difficult to literally lift myself off the bed, to pick out which shoes I wanted to wear, to even decide what color shirt I should put on, to look at my staff in the eyes, to be able to have a conversation. I literally became like this dysfunctional human being where it almost felt like the eyes were rolling in the back of my head and I was walking around stiff like a robot. My brain just went into shutdown mode.
It's amazing in not a good way. But what's interesting is that you didn't necessarily obviously see any of this coming. It just sort of happened. And
well, I didn't see it, and I'm sorry. The reason I'm cutting you off is only because there are life experiences that happened before that, which we'll get into. I didn't know from mental health. At the beginning of 2015, the topic wasn't what it was. And so having any type of dysfunction up here, your mind goes to physical complications first in terms of, do I have a tumor? Is that blocking certain, did I have an aneurysm I didn't know about, right?
Right.
And as ridiculous as those things sound, that was the way that I justified it. But as we'll come to soon find out, life builds up over time. And if you don't do anything about what builds up, it eventually can take you down like it did with me.
Right. Wow. So you spend these 2 weeks, then you struggle getting out of bed. What happened after that?
So I spoke to my owners. I told them I'm not giving you my best. I don't know how you haven't noticed it, even though I interacted with them on a daily basis.
Right.
But I asked for some time off, and they were extremely generous. Their military background, they said, we never leave a soldier out in the battlefield. Take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it takes, and let's hit the ground running. Okay. So that 3 month period it's really interesting to hear that, because again, what I knew from mental health at the time, I'm thinking, okay, if the brain scans check out, I don't have a tumor or something like that.
Right.
I'll take one of those magic pills that are antidepressants. And if one doesn't work in 4 weeks, all right, the next one will work in 4 weeks, and I'll be back in 2 months. No sweat. Right. I'll take that little rest that I haven't taken over my 13-year career, and I'll be back running.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, as we'll get to, that was not the case.
Well, it's, and we'll talk about this, I know, in a few more minutes. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people feel that a lot of this stuff can go away pretty easily with a pill. And that's not necessarily the case at all. And I'm guessing you're a pretty good example of that, but let's talk about that. So you've got this time off now, but what made you sort of wake up a day and say, you know what, I really need to get to the bottom of this. I need to get into some quality care, and what you thought might be quality care.
The answer is I'm a dummy, right? And I'm a stubborn dummy. So the same way some of us will twist our ankle and not go to the doctor because we think it's just going to heal on its own, as I was having those symptoms and justifying, it's going to get better. It's just this world's way of telling me to focus on this. I didn't get help until my system shut down. When I was describing walking like this and eyes rolling back, it was not far from the truth. And so when I went back to New York, essentially my next 2.5 year period was seeing, and I'm using air quotes, the top psychopharmacologists, doctors in the world who had the greatest degrees, who just sent me around from one prescription drug combination to another. So I was on 50 different combinations over that 2.5 years, laying in a bed, staring at the ceiling, not watching TV, not listening to the radio. And I thought, because we grow up taking an antibiotic when we have strep throat, taking an antibiotic when we have bronchitis, that I'm just waiting for the perfect combination of magic pills to kick in. And that didn't happen for me. But even with it not happening, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Right.
I kept doing the same thing, thinking that the different things that I am doing are taking new drugs. And that never worked for me. I just kept getting more and more awful side effects from them.
So let me interrupt for 1 second. So was it sort of the same doctor doing all this, or was it different series? At some point there's got to be somebody kicking around that says, dude, nothing's working, let's try this. But I mean, I guess they were all saying that, right? Hey, nothing's working, let's try this.
Well, I went to 4 different psychopharmacologists over that period of time. And it was only because I tried 10 different drugs over a certain period of time. Those didn't work. So then a doctor that I was consulting with said, all right, it didn't work down this path, let's go to this guy. And if I could tell you what my experience was with each of them, it was like literally sitting in a classroom where they had a whiteboard. And they said, well, you've tried this, and they crossed them off. You tried the SSRI combinations. Here are the SNRI combinations. Here's the MAOI. Here's the tricyclics. Then within them, the names of each of them. And it's amazing. I could rattle them off one after the other, from the Lamictals to the Latudas to the Prozacs to the, and that was my world during that time, was praying that one of those drugs would kick in for me.
So where were you staying this whole time? In an apartment or in a house or a hospital, or where were you?
This is where I'm fortunate. I had my parents, who were essentially taking care of me because I was as good as an infant at that point. I couldn't put sentences together. When I was trying to hold on with the Panthers and hoping that I'd get better in time, I haven't really shared this. I've shared it with the Panthers since, but I would write down before I got on the phone with them what I thought the conversation would be, because to do it extemporaneously, my brain couldn't do it. So I had to sit and focus and try. Okay, hi,
Almost like
Derek, how have you been?
Right.
What's up? Yeah, and it got that bad that I couldn't look at people in the eyes. I couldn't have conversations with people just in real time, and so I had no choice in the matter. I had to be home. And when you hear people say, give tough love to people who are going through mental health complications, unfortunately, I wish that was the case, that it was like, hey, toughen up. When this isn't connected, when synapses aren't firing, or when neurotransmitters aren't working, and obviously they haven't figured out the exact combination of what goes wrong, although they talk about some theories. When that's not happening, you can't connect to that level to just say, oh, let me make myself do this. And people who haven't been through it, I understand that they say, well, why is that person laying in a bed? When you don't have thoughts coming to your mind telling you to get up at that point, it doesn't connect that way. The same way I could say, I want to lift my hand from here to here, my brain is telling me to do that. When your brain doesn't have the capacity to connect on that level, you can't do those things that people are telling you to do. And it just makes you sit there more frustrated saying, this person doesn't get what I'm going through. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing, society-wide, but we're getting better, but it's still very much the prevalent feeling.
But so let me ask you this. So if I was to conceptually visit you when you were in this condition, as a friend, and I said, hey, Eric, man, come on, let's why don't you get up and we'll go get some lunch, or we'll go play, we'll throw a ball around, or we'll do something. Did you just were you giving people sort of like the blank stare, or were you still able to do that? Or was it really challenging? What was it like? Or did you have people visiting you?
Yeah, no, look, my friends are amazing. And the one stigma was never the issue with me. Like it was the ability, like explaining it to people. So my friends who had either been through something on their own or just read up on it because they cared to read up on it, they did visit. And oftentimes they'd come to my room and I wasn't even acknowledging they were there. I'm literally staring at the ceiling. When they'd say something, I'd react to it. I was waking up like the same way that we wake up and our mind goes, I got to shower, I got to brush my teeth, I got to put my shoes on, I got to go to work. That doesn't happen in the brain of someone who's going through this on a severe level. So I would wake up, stare at the ceiling, and you have this back of your brain that's saying to you, I should be thinking of things right now, but nothing's coming to mind. And so you react to stimulus of when other people say things to you, but without that, you're pretty much just a body laying there.
It's horrible. And I'm sure it was incredibly challenging to go through. So explain to me, how'd you get out of it? What brought you out? How'd you come out of this?
So 23 sessions of TMS therapy didn't work for me, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation. That led to 4 days of being awake, not being able to fall asleep, which led to suicidal ideations. And I always bring that up because if you look at me, I'm a guy who looks like I like living, right? I can tell people suicidal ideations are not these feelings of the world is awful, so I want to end it. They're error messages that go on in a record in our brain. So for me, I'm looking at these pills on my counter and my brain is saying to me, take those, swallow the whole bottle. And I have this other part of my brain that's saying, but you don't want to do that. So that divergence of thought, I had to say to myself, now is time to get checked in and to get help on a second-to-second basis instead of a every 4-week basis.
Right.
So I go to the hospital, and again, a little bit of Western medicine system right now. They tell me that the only thing I have left to try, because I've tried everything else, is shock therapy. So they put me through 12 sessions of being put under anesthesia and my brain being shocked into seizure. And that's over a 6-week span, and I get out of the hospital, and I'm still no better. So according to modern science and these experts in this field up here in the Northeast, I've tried everything and nothing's working, and I have to wait for that magic pill to eventually be discover that's going to wake me out of this. The term that they use is, it is depression, basically, that can't be treated. Right.
Okay.
It's
all right.
And again, depression was the only term that was thrown out at me. Now, to ask how I got out of it, I ended up going to a woman who practices what's called integrative psychology. Like, all right, let's try something different. And I sit down with this woman, and instead of her asking me, what are your symptoms, which is what every one of these other doctors asked me, she said, tell me about your life. Okay. So when we talk about how life experiences build up, so I mentioned I have an older brother. So from the time I was 9 until 25, I watched him break his femur bone and was in a body cast for a year, homeschool.
Wow.
Leukemia for 5 years, lost his hair, chemo, radiation, all the fun stuff, say that facetiously. Flew out of a Jeep, landed on his head, cracked his head open, lost partial vision in his eyes. Relapse of leukemia. Stronger regimen because of it being a relapse, which caused him to go into septic shock. He was in a coma for 3 months. We didn't think he'd wake, or if he did, if he'd have any brain function. Wakes, they need to put a shunt in his brain because too much fluid had built up. Kidneys fail from the septic shock. My dad donates a kidney to him. And so I'm watching this all take place, and I'm explaining this to this woman, and her mouth just drops, and she says, Eric, you have PTSD.
Right.
And I said, immediately I said, what do you mean I have PTSD? Why are you the first doctor or practitioner to mention this term to me? And so she said, listen, I've worked with 9/11 victims who've watched their friends jump out of the building. Unfortunately, I've worked with women in the slave trade, in the sex slave trade. Yep. I've worked with people who've been through tsunamis and natural disasters. Right. When the brain shuts down this way, the way that cognitively yours is shut down, this is what happens. So, immediately I thought, well, if that's the case, who doesn't deal with life experiences that ultimately affect it? Maybe not to the level. And she said, well, Eric, you've seen more than most. Okay, fair. But again, I still shot back at her and said, it sounds like life affects everybody then, not just me, if you're telling me this is my path here.
Right.
And then, I shared that 3 of my close friends passed away 2 years after that, all in the same year from heart conditions. And so she's basically telling me that our body's a system. Our mind is not just separate from our body. She was a yoga practitioner, also a psychologist. And so the reason she calls it integrative psychology is because she believes in this mind-body connection. So she convinces me to go to a breathing course. Okay. She's like, take a weekend and go to this breathing course. And I didn't want to be around anyone at this point, but I go and I'm the only male there, the only one under 40, the only one born in this country. And I'm like, I'm not supposed to be in this spot. But I listened to these set of practices. I did them religiously for the next basically 6 weeks. And over that span, a month and a half, I went from dysfunctional to getting at least my cognitive abilities back. Just from breathing correctly and stimulating a nerve in your neck called your vagus nerve that tells the rest of your body basically to chill out and it's okay. And you're not under threat all the time because that's what my body was conditioned to think by watching all these things.
Right.
So, you tell me where to go with the rest of this, because I'll tell you where it built from there. But essentially, when people ask, how did you heal? I healed from supplements and learning how to breathe properly. and people won't believe that because of the level of dysfunction that I was at. But I'm case in point that there's things that we can do to actually heal our system as opposed to just put band.
Well, look, I mean, it sounds like, I've heard of situations where, sort of the most, maybe what the most basic solution, like it's almost like it's right in front of them and they don't see that. And in your case, it turned out to be the breathing. I think that's, thank goodness. Well,
the most basic solution, and then keep in mind, some of these solutions have been around for 3,000, 5,000, depending on how long you think.
Right.
Years. We just don't look at those things because in our society, we call them Eastern, holistic, functional, and alternative. And when people hear those terms, they say, not for me, that's snake oil stuff. So,
and then obviously also not to get into too much with the, the pharma and this and that, but it's hard to charge somebody for breathing. Right.
It is. And look, my message is not don't take medication because I'm still on a low dose Lexapro. My message is more when medication is used or positioned as a cure-all, where a commercial shows a gray cloud becoming a sunny sky when you take a pill, that is leading to down a path that doesn't exist.
Yeah, right.
So if you want to use a pill for symptom management to then help you get enough strength to do some of these practices that we'll talk about, great. But for it to be the be-all, end-all, we're killing people with that message. I know that's a bold statement, but it's the truth.
Well, look, it turns out it's it turns out that's I mean, look, you know, it's a tough battle to win against the big companies like that, because it's a machine and it's tough. But you know, what I've noticed is that you've got some people with you or surrounding you or part of the movement that I think are demonstrating that there are ways to really to feel better. To feel better without necessarily you know, a bag full of pills and so forth. Now, what I'd love to do is shimmy forward to, you know, so you're sort of coming back. You're coming back up the curve. You're starting to feel a little bit better. You're doing these breathing and so forth. But what was it that you kind of said one day, you know what, more people need to know about this, or there needs to be less of a stigma? Like what got all this started?
So I decided to share I wasn't a social media person. So all I had was LinkedIn and then Facebook, and I never posted on them. I watched other people.
Sure.
So I decided to write out my story in full detail of what I've been through. So I was mentioning those medications. I put all the medications I take, and I talk about all the anhedonia and depersonalization and derealization, and not just the names, what it actually feels like. And it ends up being, according to the website Medium, it takes 36 minutes to read it. And these partners at this ad agency that I was collaborating with, they said, listen, in today's world, no one's reading 36 minutes and sitting down,
sure.
Especially a topic that people are turning away from. Cut it out, cut it down. And my thought was, cutting it down is what our media has done to these stories for the last, let's say, 10 years that people have been brave somewhat about it. All we're hearing is disorder names and erratic behaviors. People need to hear how similar this is to what they are feeling and what they've been through to open up about it. So I write this article on LinkedIn, and then funny enough, like being older dudes, right? My friend goes, your story's gone viral, which I thought was a bad thing. Like, like it made other people's computer break or something like that.
Right.
They're like, no, that's a good thing. They're like, so in a week, it gets read over 100,000 times, and I have over 400 calls from as far as China. Wow. And when you ask, like, what made me realize I need to take this to the next level, I didn't come out of this thinking I'm going to start some mental health movement. My thought was, maybe I'll write a book on the experience because it'll help people, and then I'll go back into the sports world. Right. But I write this article, see that reaction, and then my mind goes, okay, let's put these pieces together. The person who saved me told me that this is based on life experiences, not just genetics alone, and that most people, life experiences affect them. I just wrote something, and all of these people reacted to it. That means that this farce of 1 in 5 people have mental illness, and that's it, and that's the only people it affects. And I'm sorry to use that terminology, but it gets me upset hearing the campaigns 1 in 5 people have, because it's a green light for the 4 in 5 people who haven't yet gotten to the disorder level to say, that topic's not interesting to me, that doesn't affect me. Well, case in point of dummy here, that I didn't think it affected me, and then it waited for me being knocked on my ass until then I realized I don't want people to get to that point. So I kind of look back on it. Theo is our mutual friend. I looked at the platforms of the athletes first, because that was my connection. Right. And it was the way the media is portraying their stories is one-off catastrophe stories. So the media's formula is celebrity name plus disorder name plus erratic behavior, or in the case, unfortunately, of Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, a catastrophe. So give you examples. Britney Spears has depression, shaves her head, right? Theo Fleury gets raped, has major trauma conditions, can't function, right? We don't hear the details of the day-to-day symptoms of what these people go through based on this being life that affected them, right? Britney Spears didn't just become depressed, and there might have been some genetic predisposition. It was, she had a life on the road, right? She had all this pressure on her. Those things affect people. They affect child actors. By the way, they affect everyday people, because those of us who have pressures in the office to get things done, those affect us. Those are people who have family members who pass away prematurely. That affects us. Those of us who have breakups and fights and divorces, those things affect us. So we don't take notice of that. And so I'm thinking, okay, we've got these folks who have these platforms. The media is making it seem like those people only fit in that 1 in 5 category. And my mind's thinking, no, what this is these people who are brave initially, they're just the beginning part of this story coming out that everyone has something, maybe not to that level, but this is a human condition. This is not a 1 in 5 people and those people versus us, normal, mentally ill. No, it's mental health on a continuum. And so in realizing that from the feedback that I got, we created a name that's a little bit disruptive in the space. We're all a little crazy. Obviously, you can tell crazy with the A upside down. It's meant very tongue in cheek of, hey, there's really no such thing as normal because we all go through shit. We all face different challenges. Right. That messes with us and affects us a little bit. So we're all a little bit in this crazy group. What that does is it shakes the trees on the people in that 4 out of 5 group to say, come with us, be a part of this. Hey, this is something for all of us. And it takes Theo's of the world and Jamaica Holtslaw of the world and all these folks that we work with, Darren Ravel. They each have different stories of how they got there. Who cares the different stories of how they got there? The point is we all end up there, which is this being affected a little bit, right? A little bit or a lot. So, yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned Theo real briefly, and let me fill in a couple of those blanks because they're interesting blanks and it's he's got, I know a lot of the different stories may not mean as much, but they sort of all are really important elements of the stew, I guess, or the chili or whatever the hell it is. Theo, many of you may or may not know, but he was a professional hockey player, played 15 years or so. He played with the Calgary Flames. He ended up his career in professionally in the U.S. anyway with the Rangers. And I met him back when he was a Ranger. And, at the time we sort of knew as fans that he was a little bit off. There was something about the guy that he was constantly getting into brawls. He was constantly, getting into trouble. There was some sort of whispers that the guy had been sort of doing maybe some substance abuse and so forth. But the NHL, they suspended him once or twice here and there, but they never really kicked him off the team completely. But finally they did, and he spiraled out of control. He went to Europe. He just had a rough few years. And then about, as he said on a previous podcast episode, he said, which was really an incredible line to hear. He says, Mark, it was 14 years ago that I had a loaded gun in my mouth and I was about to pull the trigger. And since that time, he's emerged out of it. He did some holistic work himself, and now he's traveling throughout Canada, especially, and really talking about, healing from physical trauma, mental trauma, sexual abuse, and substance abuse, right? And what's really incredible is that his autobiography, he mentioned is the biggest selling autobiography in Canadian history with 600,000 copies. And that's incredible, right? Can you imagine, this isn't, some little novel or whatever it is. It's a tough book to write, and he got through it all. And he's just a perfect example, Eric, of the other people. You've got such a great group of athletes that have come together. So let's jump real quick into We're All a Little Crazy, because you've got, tell me how many sort of, it doesn't need to be an exact number, but give me a sense of the caliber of athletes that you've got supporting the cause. And more importantly, talk to me a little bit about Same Here.
All right, so you were at the launch event when we launched in November of last year. We had 18 mostly athletes that were a part of it.
Yeah.
Some as far as New Zealand, John Kerwin, the New Zealand All Black, who's like the Michael Jordan of rugby there, all the way to Jimmy Conrad from the MLS and USA national team in soccer. And so they sent their Same Here videos. We'll talk in a second about what Same Here means. But it's grown from that core 18. They have over 60 influencers now that we partner with.
Wow.
And it's all about, but you know what makes it easy is it's connecting on a personal level, because these people are in this to help people. They're not in this because mental health is a hot thing or a topic to jump on to build their brand. These people want to band together. There's not going to be one person that fixes this situation that we're in, this epidemic. And so talking about, you asked about Same Here. Same Here is an American Sign Language sign that came about from a conversation that Theo and I had about just two magical words being able to change a conversation between people. And so same here, being an American Sign Language side is inclusive, right? But it means I go through challenges, you go through challenges in life. Those challenges affect us. In Theo's case, it doesn't matter if it's sexual abuse and trauma. In Shamika's case, it doesn't matter if it's the loss of a loved one, the person who raised her entire life, her grandmother. In other people's cases, it physical health and traumatic brain injury. But we all go through different challenges, and then those challenges end up affecting our mental health at various levels. So this concept of same here is not only helpful for getting the masses, that 4 out of 5 to be a part of it, but it's helpful to also get the people who are, having influence to say, this is not about me raising my hand and just saying I have disorder. It's raising my hand and saying, here's the challenges in life I face, just like everyone else. Sure, I'll be open to talk about it. And that's what's allowed us to grow and bring more people of influence on. That's really incredible.
And what's important, and what I really like about the same here, the symbol and so forth, is that, as you said, it's not just 1 in 5, because there's so many other people that are sort of affected and impacted by the people that are going through that also. It's not just one person that's going through what they're going through, but it's all the people that surround them too, and it's great what you're doing, Eric, to bring more visibility to something that's just so, I think it's been, and it's been pushed aside for so long. And it's just been like you said, sort of a suck it up and deal with it, get over it, that kind of stuff. But it's not that easy. And it's such an important thing that you're doing, that you're causing more people to just talk about it and not feel that they need to sort of hide away because they're going through this, but because they can step forward and really talk about it some more. So congrats on this so far, Eric. I mean, you're doing such a great job with this, and I'm sure you're excited to see how it's growing. And how do you just give me sort of a quick overview of what you're hoping to take this? What level are you hoping to take this to?
Well, from the beginning, as evidence of what the name is on the back, we consider this a global movement. So when Ben Meisner, the goalie in Germany, shared his story on the Players Tribune platform, we got connected, and he's part of our group. I mentioned John Kerwin. We've got cricket players. We've got Aussie, rugby players that
Sure.
are part of it. So, and again, that was just the sports piece. So it's very much global. That's number one. Number two, I would say there's the marketing element of changing the conversation, and then the execution element of the actual programs we deliver. And so our name, our logo, what we stand for, that's going to be what we stand behind to change the message. But then within changing the message, these same here programs of going to K through 12, through colleges, to companies, to veterans groups, it's meant to bring the conversation directly to people. Because I don't think, unfortunately, and this might not be a popular opinion, but I'm going to say it, no matter how many people of influence speak up, if the message that is delivered continues to be delivered just through the mouthpiece of the media, who just wants the salacious story of celebrity disorder, we're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
We need to connect on a human level of what our day-to-day is like. So to answer your question, it's continue to grow the brand globally and continue to grow the programs so that it's not just me and Darren Ravel and Theo, or me and Darren Ravel and Shamika in a market. It's
right.
We have another media member. We have another influencer. We've got another advocate. And we can implement these all over the place instead of just with the core that started. And that's what happens, I think, with the growth of any business, is being able to scale and get out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. The whole point of my Make Your Mark podcast is to really shine a spotlight on people that are really taking what they've been through and really making a positive impact now. A lot of the athletes that I speak to, I don't care as much about their athletic career. It's all about what they're doing about it and with it going forward, right? And what you've done is you've been in the sports industry, you've been surrounded by a lot of these people, but then you went through your own specific trauma, and it was very incredibly challenging. But you've emerged from it, really sort of kicking ass. I mean, you've really run towards the sun, kind of a thing. You're going after it, and what I appreciate is the fact that you're challenging what has been a stigma for a long time, and you're getting much more, every day more and more people are tying into this, and every day people are being positively affected by it. And, I don't know if enough people tell you that, but they should, because, if you need some more fuel to keep the keep the fire going, that's it. So thanks for being on the Make Your Mark podcast. I really appreciate it, Eric. And, I can't wait to see how this all really grows from here. Really excited.
Thank you, man.
Thanks so much for joining us today on this episode of Make Your Mark podcast. The goal of the podcast is to help you find ways to make your mark, to succeed in life, and to jump past your competition. Be sure to leave me a review on iTunes and Stitcher, and subscribe to be the first to hear new episodes. If you're looking for ways to make your mark, send me an email, mark@markmoyer.com, and I'll get back to you right away. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.